He had crossed an ocean to keep a promise he made in the rain 9 years ago. The first door he would knock on would be hers. He climbed the steps of the house he grew up beside, his heart in his throat, and he raised his hand to knock. The door opened before his knuckles ever touched the wood, and there she was, Lily, 9 years older and somehow exactly the same, the face he had spent 9 years pulling out of the fog of his ruined memory, standing close enough to touch. He forgot how to speak. She forgot how to breathe. For a moment, neither of them was sure the other was real. Then a small boy popped out from behind her, curious about the stranger frozen on the porch. 9 years old, give or take. And the boy had his eyes, the same unusual gray and blue that ran through every man in his family, the eyes his own father carried to the grave. The boy turned to reach for a toy just inside the door, and his sleeve slipped back, and there on the inside of that small wrist sat a crescent the color of dried roses. The same mark Jiho had carried since the day he was born. The same mark only the men of his blood ever wore. His heart stopped. He had come back to find the girl he loved. He had found a son no one ever told him about. A quick favor before we start. If you have ever loved someone you thought you lost forever, drop a heart in the comments and hit subscribe, because this story is for you. Now, let me tell you how a boy from Atlanta and the girl next door became the saddest secret of all. Before the funeral, before the lie, before 9 stolen years, there were 2 children on a porch step in Atlanta, and the whole world fit between them. His name was Jiho. Her name was Lily. He moved onto her street when he was 7 years old, the quiet Korean boy whose family kept their curtains drawn and their voices low. She was the girl next door who refused to let anyone stay a stranger. She knocked on his door the first week and asked if he wanted to see the creek behind the houses. He did not have the English yet to say yes, so he only nodded, and that small nod was the beginning of everything. They grew up in each other's pockets. Skin knees and shared headphones and homework spread across her kitchen floor. He taught her the words his grandfather mailed him from Korea. She taught him how to laugh out loud in a house that had forgotten the sound. She noticed early that he went silent whenever his grandfather called, every single time, as if a hand reached across the ocean and closed his throat. She told him once that it was a good thing he lived next to her and not next to that man. She was only teasing. She did not know she had just named the whole tragedy of his life. The man an ocean away who made everyone quiet. The man who would one day make her quiet too. By the time they were grown, the thing between them had a name they were both too frightened to say out loud. Everyone in the neighborhood saw it. Her mother saw it. His silence saw it. The only 2 people who pretended not to notice were the 2 of them. Her mother asked her once if she and Jiho were together. Lily said they were just friends, same as always, and her mother laughed at her for a full minute, because everyone knew. Everyone except the 2 who were too afraid to ruin the best thing either of them had ever had. Jiho wanted to tell her the truth. The truth had lived in his chest since they were children, but his grandfather had already drawn the map of his whole life, a life with a family name to protect and a bloodline to carry, and there was no room on that map for a girl from his street in Atlanta. So Jiho swallowed it, the way his family swallowed everything. He was leaving in the morning. Korea had called him home for the military service every man in his family was bound to give. 2 years across an ocean. His grandfather had arranged all of it, the flight, the papers, the future waiting on the other side. It rained that last night as if the sky already knew what it was about to take from them. She stood with him under the porch roof and told him 2 years was not forever. He told her it felt like forever, and she made him promise that when he came home, the first door he knocked on would be hers. There, in the rain, with 2 years and an ocean about to open between them, he finally stopped swallowing the truth. He reached for her face, and he told her the thing he had carried since he was a boy of 7 who could not yet say yes in English. He told her he had loved her his whole life, and that he had only been too much of a coward to say it until that night. She did not answer him with words. She kissed him in the rain, and every year they had wasted being afraid and came undone in a single moment. The porch light flickered. The storm closed around them like a curtain, and the night gave them the one thing the years had been too frightened to give. They promised each other the rest of their lives that night. Neither of them knew the morning would be the last time they ever saw each other as the people they were. 3 weeks into his service, on a mountain road slick with rain, the convoy carrying Jiho went off the edge. The reports that reached Atlanta were short and cruel. A deadly accident, several soldiers dead, several more missing, and among the missing, one name that stopped a girl's heart 3,000 miles away. But Jiho was not dead. He had been thrown clear, found 2 days later, broken and burning with fever, his memory torn open by a wound to the head. He did not know his own name. He did not know the country he was in. He did not know the girl waiting for a knock on her door in Atlanta. And the first face he saw when the fog in his mind began to lift belonged to his grandfather, Chairman Co., the man who made everyone quiet. While his grandson lay in a hospital learning the world again, like a newborn, the chairman received 2 pieces of news on the same afternoon. The first was that Jiho would live, but his memory might take years to return, if it ever returned all. The second came from a man the family paid to watch its interests in America. The girl in Atlanta, the one his grandson had grown up beside, was pregnant. The timing left no doubt whose child it was. A lesser man might have felt joy, a great-grandchild, the bloodline carried forward. But the chairman did not see a child. He saw a scandal, a son of his house, heir to everything the family had built, tied forever to a girl with no name and no fortune, and no use to the empire he had spent his life protecting. So he gave the order that stole 10 years from 4 lives at once. Bury the recovery records. Let the world believe the boy's memory was gone for good. Make the girl in America believe he was dead. And make certain she understood that her child was to carry no claim to the family. Not now, not ever. Or the family would take everything from her, including the child. And so the cruelest lie of all was set in motion. 2 people who loved each other were each told the other was lost forever. One of them would grieve at an empty grave. The other would wake every morning straining to remember a face he could feel but could not see. They told her there was a service. They gave her a stone with his name carved into it. There was nobody to bury, only the word missing turning slowly into the word gone. And Lily, carrying his child, went to that stone every week and talked to a man who was not beneath it. Then, when the pregnancy began to show, a stranger came to her door. Polite, expensive, cold as a closed bank vault. He told her the family she was thinking of had no knowledge of her and wished to keep it that way. He held out an envelope of money and told her to take it, raise her child, and never once attach their name to hers. If she did, he said, they had the means to take everything from her, including the child. She was 19 years old, pregnant, grieving a man she believed was dead, and now frightened by a power whose edges she could not see. She did not take the money, but she took the warning, and she wrapped it around her heart like barbed wire, and she raised her son in its shadow, telling anyone who asked that his father was simply gone. She named him Noah, a name that belonged to no country and every country, a name that asked permission from no one. He came into the world with his mother's warm caramel skin and her soft mouth, but his eyes opened pale gray and blue, and on the inside of his small right wrist sat a crescent the color of dried roses. Every time she looked at her son, she saw the boy she had buried. She raised him on a waitress wage and then a nurse's salary on long nights and longer prayers. She never married. She never even tried. Some part of her was still standing on a porch in the rain, waiting for a knock that was never going to come. 9 years she carried it. 9 years of being mother and father both. And across an ocean, in a house that worshipped its own name, a man was slowly, painfully beginning to remember her. For 9 years the doctors called it a miracle that he functioned at all. The memories came back to him in pieces, out of order, like a film cut apart and handed to him one frame at a time. His childhood was the last to return, and the very last face to surface out of the fog was hers. He did not remember her name at first. He remembered the rain. He remembered a porch. He remembered the feeling of finally telling the truth after a lifetime of swallowing it. And then, all at once, like a door blown open, he remembered Lily. He went to his grandfather's people and asked for everything about his life before the accident. They gave him almost nothing. They told him America was a closed chapter, that whoever he thought he remembered had moved on years ago. But a man who has lost 9 years does not trust easily, and a heart that remembers rain does not let go. He had made a promise on a porch, the first door he would knock on, and he meant to keep it. So he bought a ticket to Atlanta. He told no one, and he flew across the ocean to keep a promise he had made in a rainstorm 9 years and a stolen lifetime ago. The street was older than he remembered. The trees had grown. The porch where he had once told the truth in the rain still stood, weathered now, waiting. He climbed the steps with his heart in his throat and 9 years of silence behind him. The door opened before he could knock, and the whole world stopped on that porch. She had come to send a neighbor's child home, a dish towel still in her hand, and instead she found a ghost standing in the afternoon light. Lily looked at the man on her steps, and every drop of color drained from her face. Her lips moved, but no sound came. The towel slipped from her fingers and folded itself on the floor. He said her name like it was the only word he had left. She shook her head, slow at first, then fast, backing away from the door as if distance could undo what she was seeing. She told him he was dead. She told him she had stood at his grave. She told him this was not possible, that he could not be here, that he could not be real. And he stood there, helpless, watching the woman he loved come apart at the sight of him alive. And then the boy slipped out from behind her, drawn by the strange quiet, looking up at the tall stranger with open curiosity. Jiho's eyes dropped to the child and his whole body went still. The face was new to him. The eyes were not. He was staring at his own eyes set in a small brown face. And when the boy turned and his sleeve fell back, the crescent on that little wrist finished the sentence the eyes had started. Lily saw where his gaze had gone. She pulled Noah behind her so fast the boy stumbled, and she put her body between her son and the past she had buried. "Get inside, baby," she told Noah in a voice stretched thin as wire. "Go on up to your room." The boy went, looking back the whole way. And then it was just the two of them on the porch, 9 years and a child and an ocean of lies standing in the air between them, and neither of them knowing which truth would fall first. She did not invite him in. She stepped out onto the porch instead and pulled the door shut behind her, sealing her son on the other side of it, away from the man and the storm she felt coming. Her hands were shaking. Her voice, when she found it, came out hard because hard was the only thing holding her together. She asked him what he wanted. He said he wanted to understand. He told her about the accident, the lost years, the memory that came back to him a piece at a time until the last piece was her. He told her he had flown across the world to keep the promise he made on this exact porch in the rain. And she listened with her arms wrapped around herself, and every word he said was a knife, because every word meant the grave she had cried at for 9 years had never held him at all. Then his eyes went to the window where a small face was watching, and he asked the question that had been burning in him since the door opened. He asked how old the boy was, and Lily's whole body turned to stone. The threat from 9 years ago rose up in her like cold water. They have the means to take everything from you, including the child. She heard it as clearly as the day the stranger said it, and so she did the only thing she had ever been allowed to do. She lied. "He is not yours," she said. "His father is a man you never met. You have been gone 9 years, Jiho, and you do not get to walk up these steps and lay claim to my son." The words came out steady, and they cost her everything, and he saw the cost even as he heard the lie. Then she stepped back inside and shut the door in his face, and she stood on the other side of it with her hand pressed flat against the wood and her son's questions waiting at the top of the stairs. A wiser man, a more broken man, would have flown home. But Jiho had spent 9 years being told a version of his own life that turned out to be a lie, and he had learned the hard way not to trust a story just because someone shut a door on it. So he did not leave Atlanta. He took a room at a cheap motel 2 miles from her street, and the next morning he came back. She found him sitting on her porch steps at 9 a.m. with 2 coffees, one held out to her like a peace offering. She told him to leave. He stayed. She told him she would call the police. He said she could, but that he would only come back the next day because he had nothing left in the world to go back to and everything in the world sitting in that house. Day after day, he returned. He never pushed past the door. He never raised his voice. He simply refused to disappear the way everyone had spent 9 years making people disappear. And it drove her to the edge because the easiest thing in the world would have been to hate a stranger, and he was not a stranger. He was the boy from the creek. He was the rain on the porch. He was the face she had grieved into the ground. Every morning, she opened her door, meaning to scream at him, and every morning some traitor part of her was glad the steps were not empty. No one noticed the way children notice everything. He saw the man who kept coming back. He saw how his mother's voice changed when she talked to him, sharp on the surface and shaking underneath. And being 9 and fearless, he did what his mother was too frightened to do. He walked up to the stranger one afternoon and asked him who he was. Jiho looked at his son, close enough now to count the lashes around those familiar eyes, and he chose his words like a man crossing a frozen lake. He told Noah he was an old friend of his mother's, that they grew up together on this street a long time ago. Noah considered that, then asked why his mother cried after he left every day if they were friends. And Jiho had no answer that a 9-year-old could hold, so he asked the boy a question instead. He asked what his name was. Noah, the boy said, and Jiho repeated it quietly, the way you say a word you have waited your whole life to learn. Lily came out and pulled Noah inside before another word could pass, her eyes blazing at Jiho over her son's head. But it was already too late for the thing she feared most. The boy had decided he liked the quiet man on the steps, and the quiet man on the steps had just heard his son say his own name for the first time. What followed was not a romance yet. It was a war, fought in a small house on a quiet street, between a man who wanted the truth and a woman who had been trained for 9 years to protect it with lies. He would say the boy had his eyes. She would say plenty of people had gray eyes. He would say the boy had his family's mark. She would say it was a common birthmark and he was seeing what he wanted to see. Every claim he made, she met with a flat denial, and every denial cost her a little more of the wall she was hiding behind. But the anger between them was not only anger, and they both knew it. They would be standing on the porch mid-argument, faces close, voices low so the boy would not hear, and the years would fall away without warning and leave them staring at each other with the old pull humming underneath the fight. She would catch herself, he would catch himself, and the moment would snap shut, and one of them would say something cruel just to put the distance back, because the distance felt safer than the truth of what was still there. One night she told him the cruelest thing she could find, that he should go back to Korea and the life that was waiting for him there, because there was nothing in Atlanta that belonged to him. And he looked at the window where Noah's light was still on, and he said quietly that he thought there was. And she shut the door because if she had stood there 1 second longer, she would have either slapped him or kissed him, and she no longer trusted herself to know which. If this story touched you, even a little, let me know in the comments. Tell me, would you have forgiven him after 9 years, or would the wall have stayed up? Like this film, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe so you never miss the next story. Your love is the only reason these films keep being made. It was Noah who cracked the wall, not Jiho. The boy fell from the low branch of the oak in the yard one Saturday and split his knee open, and he cried for the stranger before he cried for his mother, because the stranger happened to be closer. Jiho had him scooped up and pressing a clean handkerchief to the wound before Lily made it across the grass, and the sight of the two of them together, the same eyes, the same set of the jaw, bent over the same scraped knee, hit her so hard she had to grab the porch rail to stay standing. He carried the boy inside without being asked. He knew where the kitchen was. He had eaten breakfast in it 10,000 times as a child. He sat Noah on the counter and cleaned the cut and told him a story to keep him from looking. The same story Lily's mother used to tell to keep them still, and Lily stood frozen in her own kitchen, watching a ghost remember her life better than she wanted him to. When Noah was bandaged and sent off to rest, the two adults stood in the kitchen in a silence too full to break. She thanked him, stiffly. He said he would always come when the boy was hurt, whether she let him in the door or not. And something in the way he said it, plain and certain and without a single demand attached, made her turn away so he would not see her face. He could not make her tell the truth, so he went looking for it himself. At night, in the motel room 2 miles away, he laid out everything he knew and started pulling threads. The boy was 9, born the year after he left. Born the year after he left. The eyes were no coincidence a stranger could carry. The mark belonged to his family and no other. And Lily, the most honest person he had ever known, was lying to his face with a terror in her eyes that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with someone else. That was the thread that would not let go. She was not afraid of Jiho. She was afraid of what stood behind him. So he stopped trying to prove the boy was his and started trying to find out who had made the mother of his child so afraid. He pulled his own medical records from Korea, the ones his family swore were lost. He pulled the old reports of the convoy accident. He started tracing money, quiet money, that had moved out of a family account the same season Noah was born. And the deeper he dug, the colder it got, because the trail did not lead to strangers. It led home. It led to the man who made everyone quiet. He was not the only one who could trace things. Somewhere across an ocean, an account was being watched, and the moment Jiho started pulling at the old buried files, an alarm rang in a house in Korea. Within days, the warmth of his quiet investigation turned cold and dangerous. A man he did not know found him outside the motel one evening, an expensive man with an empty smile, and told him pleasantly that some doors were better left closed, that a man who had only just gotten his life back should think hard before he gambled it on old history. The man knew which motel. The man knew which room. The man, it became clear, knew about Atlanta and about the woman and about the boy. It was a threat wearing the costume of friendly advice, and Jiho understood it perfectly because it was the same costume the family always wore. That night, he sat on the edge of the motel bed and understood that he had not flown into a sad story. He had flown into a war that had been running for 9 years without him, and the people on the other side of it had already proven exactly how far they would go. And for the first time, he was not afraid for himself. He was afraid for a woman and a boy 2 miles away who had been standing in the blast radius of his family, alone the whole time. Lily saw the change in him. The man who came to her porch the next morning was quieter, harder around the eyes, and when she asked him what was wrong, he would not say, only that he needed to be near them for a while, and that she should tell him at once if any stranger came around the house. The fear in his voice was real, and it was a fear she recognized because it was her own fear, the one she had carried alone for 9 years, and now there were suddenly 2 of them carrying it. Almost against her will, she let him stay longer that day. And the day after that, it was Noah who turned the standoff into something else. The boy had a bicycle with the training wheels just taken off, and he had been too proud to ask his mother for help and too scared to try alone. So he asked the quiet man, and Jiho, who had learned to ride a bike in that exact spot 20 years before, falling off, he admitted about 100 times, took the back of the seat and ran. Lily came out onto the porch and watched the man hold up her son and run beside him down the same stretch of sidewalk where the man himself had once been a boy. She watched him refuse to let go until Noah told him to. She watched her son fly down the street on his own for the first time, shrieking with joy, and she watched the man stand in the middle of the road with his hand still half raised, laughing, with tears in his eyes that the boy was too far away to see. And the wall inside her cracked another inch, because a man who would run that long beside a child was not a man you could keep hating, no matter how badly your fear needed you to. That evening, after Noah was asleep, the 2 of them sat on the porch steps in the dark, and for once neither was fighting. The anger had worn thin, and what lay under it was harder to hide. She asked him, finally, what his life had been over there in the years she thought he was gone. And he told her. The hospital, the blank where his life should have been. The slow horror of remembering that he had loved someone and not being able to find her face. She listened, and somewhere in the telling, she stopped sitting like a woman braced for a blow. They ended up turned toward each other in the dark, closer than either had meant to be, the old pull stronger now than the fear for the first time. His hand was near hers on the step. Her face was turned up to his. The whole 9 years narrowed down to a few inches of warm night air. And then a light went on upstairs, and Noah's small voice called for his mother, and the moment broke like a held breath. She got up too fast. She told him good night in a voice that was not quite steady. But she did not tell him to stay away the next day, and they both noticed that she did not. The thread he had been pulling finally gave. An old friend and soul who owed him a favor sent back what the family had spent 9 years hiding, and it broke something open in him that had been sealed since the mountain road. His recovery records had not been lost. They had been buried on purpose by an order that traced straight back to his grandfather. A doctor's note, dated only weeks after the accident, said plainly that his memory was expected to return in time. That note had been hidden. They had told the world and told Jiho himself that he was gone forever inside his own mind, and they had chosen deliberately to let him stay lost. And then the second blow, worse than the first. A record of a payment. A man sent to Atlanta the year Noah was born. Sent to a frightened girl of 19 to make sure she believed her child's father was dead, and to make sure she understood what would happen to her and her baby if she ever said otherwise. He read it twice. Then he sat very still in a cheap motel room and finally understood the whole shape of what had been done. Not only his memory, not only 9 years, a family, a son, a life, all of it erased to protect a name. And the woman 2 miles away had not been lying to wound him. She had been holding a knife to her own child's future for 9 years because his family had put it in her hand. He was not the only one the buried files had woken. 3,000 miles away, the alarm that rang when he started digging had reached the one person his return threatened most. Her name was Seoyin, though she had gone by Victoria since her first season in the West. Beautiful as cut glass and twice as sharp. For years she had been arranged, groomed, and promised to Jiho, and through him to the entire empire she meant to inherit. She had her own people, and what they brought back turned her cold fury into something far more dangerous. A child, a boy with the family eyes and the family mark, an heir who came before her, with a claim to everything she had spent her life positioning herself to take. If that boy were ever acknowledged, every door she had walked toward her whole life would slam in her face. So she did not wait. She did not send a stranger this time. She got on a plane and flew to Atlanta herself, because some things a woman like Victoria prefers to handle with her own hands. She wanted to see the girl who had ruined her future. She wanted to measure her, and she wanted to deliver the old family thread in person, the way it had been delivered 9 years before, certain it would work the same way twice. The first blow came as paper, the way the family always struck. An anonymous complaint to the state, questioning whether Lily was a fit mother. Then another, a claim that she had concealed a child's paternity for money. Lies, every word, but expensive lies, the kind that come with lawyers attached, and the power to open a custody investigation against a single mother who had never put a foot wrong in 9 years. Lily sat at her kitchen table with the official letter shaking in her hands and felt the old nightmare step out of the past and into her living room. They were trying to take her son. She did not know who to turn to, and then she realized with a strange and terrible relief that for the first time in 9 years she was not facing it alone. She showed Jiho the letter, and he did not flinch. He told her, gently, that he knew exactly whose hand this was. He told her about the buried records, the payment the man sent to her door when she was 19. He told her he knew what his family had done to her, all of it, and that he had known for days and had only been waiting for the right moment to lay it down without breaking her. And the wall she had held up for 9 years, the wall built of fear and grief and barbed wire, finally cracked straight down the middle, because the one thing she had never had in all those years of carrying it alone was someone on her side who already knew. It came out on the porch, where everything between them had always come out. She told him they had said he was dead, and that she had believed them, that she had stood at a grave with his name on it and talked to him every week for 9 years. She told him a man had come to her door when her belly was just beginning to show and promised that if she ever tied her baby to his family, they would take the child from her. She had been 19, alone, certain he was in the ground, and she had done the only thing a terrified girl could do. She asked him, with 9 years of held-back tears finally breaking loose, what else she could have done. And he told her the truth. Nothing. She was supposed to do exactly what she did. She had kept Noah safe from the very people who had kept Jiho from him. He told her she was the bravest person he had ever known, that she had stood in the path of his family alone for 9 years and never once let them have her son. And she broke completely then, and he caught her the way he had wanted to catch her for 9 years, on the same boards where he had told her the truth in the rain a lifetime ago. She told him through her tears the thing she had never said out loud to a living soul. The boy's name was Noah, and he was his. He had always been his. And in the dark, on the porch, with the worst of it finally spoken, the storm between them broke at last, and what was left underneath was the same thing that had been there since they were 2 children on a step with the whole world fitting between them. He kissed her, and 9 years dissolved like they had never been. Victoria did not expect to find the girl unafraid. She came to the small house on the quiet street, expecting the same frightened 19-year-old the family had broken before, and instead she found a woman who had been to the bottom of her fear and come back up with someone beside her. She delivered the threat anyway, because pride would not let her do otherwise. Sign away the boy's claim to the family, take a generous payment, disappear, or she would bury Lily in courtrooms until there was nothing left, not even the child. She said she had done this before. She said she always won. Lily listened to all of it, calm in a way that unsettled the other woman. And when Victoria finished, Lily said only that she had come a very long way to threaten a waitress's daughter. Victoria said she had come to protect what was hers. And Lily told her, quietly, with the certainty of a woman who had finally stopped being afraid, that nothing in that house had ever been hers. Not the empire, not the name, and not the man who was at that moment standing in the doorway behind Lily, having heard every word. Victoria's polished face cracked for the first time when she saw him there, standing not in front of Lily as her judge, but behind her as her shield. She understood in that instant that the thing she had flown across the world to protect was already lost, and that the only question left was how much of it she would lose and how publicly. They had agreed to tell Noah nothing until the danger was truly past. So for a while longer Jiho stayed the quiet man who came around, and the 3 of them fell, without naming it, into the shape of a family. It happened on an ordinary evening, the kind they had quietly been building. Lily at the stove, Jiho and Noah laying out plates, the radio playing low. Noah reached across the table for a glass that was about to fall, and Jiho caught it first, and the boy, without thinking, without any idea of the weight of it, said the word that stopped 3 hearts at once. "Nice catch, Dad." The kitchen went silent while the radio played on. The boy froze, his own word echoing back to him, his face filling with confusion and a strange dawning hope. He started to stammer that he had not meant it, that it slipped out, that he did not know why he said it. Lily had turned from the stove with her hand over her mouth. Jiho knelt down slowly until he was level with his son's pale gray and blue eyes, the same as his own, and told him softly that he could say it again if he wanted to, that he was allowed to say it. And across the kitchen, 9 years of grief and fear and stolen time came pouring down Lily's face, because she knew, watching them, that the truth was already home. It had been sitting at their table all along. That night Jiho made a choice that would cost him the only inheritance he had ever been promised, and save the only thing he had ever truly wanted. He had spent 9 years as a man things were done to. He decided in the dark to become a man who acted. His grandfather had built his whole life around the family name, and its reputation was the one thing he would burn the world to protect. So that was exactly where Jiho would strike with the truth. Lily warned him that if he did this, he would lose everything, the company, the inheritance, his whole family. He told her they had taken 9 years from him. They had taken his son's first words, his first steps, the first time he rode a bicycle down a street his own father had once ridden. They had told her he was dead and told him she had moved on, and they had done all of it to protect a name. He did not want the name. He had never wanted it. He told her he would trade the entire empire for one porch on one street in Atlanta, and he would call it the finest deal he ever made. He did not do it quietly. He gathered every record he had unburied, the hidden medical note, the trail of the payment to Atlanta, the order, in his grandfather's own authority, to let a man stay lost inside his own mind. And he laid all of it in front of the one thing his family feared more than any court, the public eye. He stood before the cameras and told the world that 9 years ago his family had been told he might recover his memory, and that they had chosen to hide it. He told them they had sent a man to a young woman in America to swear to her that he was dead, and to threaten her unborn child if she ever said his name. He said plainly that the family name was not worth what had been done to protect it, and that he was taking back the years they had stolen, starting now. The story moved like fire. The chairman, who had spent 60 years making everyone around him quiet, found that for the first time in his life he could not silence the room. Board members resigned. Partners withdrew. The empire he had guarded at the cost of his own grandson's life came apart at the seams, brick by brick. And Victoria, whose whole future had been built on marrying into that name, watched it crumble and understood she had wagered her life on a sinking ship. The custody complaints, exposed as her own doing, collapsed under their own weight. The people who had stolen 9 years from 2 innocent lives were left standing in the wreckage of the very name they had ruined everything to protect. With the danger finally behind them, there was one conversation left, and it was the most frightening of all. Not a courtroom, not a camera, a 9-year-old boy on a couch, and the truth he had deserved his whole life. Lily reminded him how he had always asked about his father, and how she had always said he was gone. She told him she had truly believed it, for a long and terrible time, but that she had been wrong. His father had not stayed away because he wanted to. Some people had made him stay away, and he had spent years finding his way back to them, across an ocean, through a broken memory, all the way to this couch. The boy looked between them, his pale gray and blue eyes moving from his mother to the man who had taught him to ride a bicycle and never once let go. And slowly, the way the sun comes up, he understood. It was him. He was his dad. That was why he had his eyes. Jiho told him yes, that was why he had his eyes and his mark. And his mother added through her tears, his terrible habit of falling off bicycles. Noah did not cry. He did something braver. He climbed across the couch and put his arms around the father he had waited his whole life to meet, and he held on the way Jiho had held that bicycle, like he was never going to let go. Months later, the danger long behind them and the name they had once feared now powerless, Noah's school held an event it held every year, Bring Your Parent Day. For 9 years, Noah had walked into that classroom holding only his mother's hand. This year the door opened, and Jiho walked in holding Lily's hand. The whole class turned, and at the front of the room, the boy who had spent his life explaining why his father was never there stood a little taller. When the teacher asked him to introduce his family, Noah smiled and said that everybody kept telling him he looked exactly like his dad. The class laughed, warm and easy, and Jiho crossed the room and knelt down beside his son, level with the eyes that matched his own, and answered loud enough for every person in that room to hear. That is because you are my son. And there, in a bright Atlanta classroom, the family that had lost 10 years to a lie finally stood together in the open, with nothing left to hide and no one left to fear. They had taken his memory. They had taken her belief. They had taken 9 years that belonged to a porch, a promise, and a boy with his father's eyes. But in the end, the one thing they could never take was the truth. And the truth, like a sun reaching for a falling glass, had found its way home. Thank you for staying to the very end. If this story moved you, drop a like, leave a comment telling me your favorite moment, and subscribe so the next film comes straight to you. Until next time, take care of the people who knock on your door.